Gotham City has been left in darkness. No major rides, no new thrills. In over 2 decades, the shadow of the bat is now gone. But eventually, the darkness must subside, and something new will arise.
Excuse me, I'm Rollercoaster David, and this is my review of Batman, Gotham City Escape at Parque Warner, Madrid. Let's kick off with a look at the ride's layout. Gotham City Escape starts with a launch that sends you up a short hill and coasting slowly through the first corkscrew inversion. After pulling out, you're launched with some force towards a giant top hat, which rises and twists sharply to the left. It's at the top that you have the anticipation stall, where you're held edging slowly forwards before diving into a beyond vertical drop. A short chicane follows, then it hits a powerful ejector airtime hill that sends you flying up out of your seat. You then pull up and into the second inversion, a reverse sidewinder. This leads into a small dip before pulling up into a sharply banked left and right chicane. Next is a corkscrew before you take a wave turn to the right, before dropping down into the final launch section. At the end of the launch, you rise upwards to the left in an S-curve, before you twist to the left and invert into the ride's long stall section. Next, you twist to the right and dive down into the brakes, going a short way up a vertical spike, before dropping slowly back down to earth. The ride finishes on a turntable, which turns to the right and rejoins the rest of the track. As you can see, this coaster's got quite an interesting layout that kind of takes you on a tour of the centre of the park. It's almost a bit disorientating as you rapidly move from one side of the park to the other, and I really think it makes good use of the space that was available to it. Its layout is unlike any other coaster, and makes a nice change from coasters with more traditional out and back or twister layouts. Just like Nemesis could only ever exist at Alton Towers, I think that this is a genuine signature attraction for the park that couldn't exist anywhere else. The unique space constraints that forced its layout into the shape it is make it something completely unique, and that should be celebrated. Its design also gives a great visual of the top hat combined with the park's giant signature space tower when you first walk into the park. It's quite an impressive visual. The first launch has a good kick to it as it sends you out of the station, although the upward section of track that leads into the corkscrew does mean you slow down again quite fast, and as a result the corkscrew is taken quite slowly, giving a floaty hang time sensation without any real whippiness. The second launch is impressive, and is probably where you reach the ride's top speed, which is just over 64 miles per hour. The launch goes through a small archway, which does make it feel faster, but it doesn't seem to quite reach the same face-melting speed intensity that you get on Taron or Velocicoaster's second launch. The launches in general are good though, but I can't deny I was maybe hoping for a little more oomph to them, given that these trains are smaller and lighter than other recent Intamin launch coasters. You get a brief bit of airtime at the top of the top hat, and then you enter the anticipation stall, which is an interesting element. This is the second time Intamin have attempted it, the first being on Tutatis, and I think it actually works quite well on this coaster. You're held at a height and given time to appreciate the view as you slowly edge forwards, sort of like you do on Takabisha at Fuji-Q or Hang Time at Knott's Berry Farm. You're then released into a beyond vertical drop which's got a real kick to it, particularly in the back seats with some strong ejector air right as you drop. It's a sequence that works much better with the shorter Intamin trains, and does, as the name suggests, build anticipation for the rest of the ride. It's a brief pause in an otherwise pretty relentless layout, so unlike a similar element on Tutatis, this actually enhances the ride in my opinion. It's also probably a necessity to control the forces in the beyond vertical drop, and the following airtime hill, as that airtime hill is quite simply amazing. This is some of the strongest ejector air you can find on any coaster, and watching off-ride I was sometimes surprised to see just how quickly this element is taken. You're completely thrown out of your seat and it's a wonderful, thrilling part of the ride. The intensity of the airtime here actually surprised me, and if you're not expecting it, you might find yourself grabbing onto something as you go over it. I'm struggling to actually think of a stronger airtime moment in Europe, but nothing's actually coming to mind. It really is that good. The second inversion also has a surprise little pop of airtime right before you twist upside down, which is a nice sensation. Unfortunately, the next session of the ride is impossible to film from anywhere I had access to, but basically at the bottom there's a small dip through an archway that gives a sudden brief burst of airtime that's quite fun. The pullout has some fairly strong G's here, which gives a good squeeze before releasing into the next turn, and then you have the ride's second corkscrew. Now if there's a section of the ride that feels slightly lackluster, it's probably this corkscrew, which feels a bit uninspired and forceless. Given the ride already started with a corkscrew, I'd have preferred a different element here, maybe combining one of the chicanes and the corkscrew into a 0G roll or something different, but even if it is a bit uninspired, the twisty bits in the corkscrew here are still really good fun and don't really detract much from the ride. The falling wave turn though is a real highlight, particularly towards the front of the train as it gives some really quite surprising ejector air. The final launch has some decent force behind it, and these frequent launches really make the ride feel rapid and fast paced. The ride duration could have been longer if it had been slower or allowed to coast through some sections, but the frequent speed boosts mean the ride never really slows down until the end, apart from on the anticipation stall, so Gotham City Escape really has quite a relentless pace to it. The final inversion, which everyone seems to call a 0G stall, actually doesn't ride like a 0G stall at all. There isn't the upward propulsion aspect to it, so it ends up being more like a hang time stall, where you're dangling upside down held against the restraint, rather than experiencing the 0G floatiness you normally get on this kind of stall. It's not actually a bad element at all, and does make the ride more unique because this section feels so different to similar sections on other modern Intamin rides. It does still have that characteristic left-right-left sort of shake to it that other Intamin 0G stalls have, but it's a different sensation when you're freely hanging against the restraint, rather than floating. Unfortunately, I don't really get the ending to the ride though, and it's actually a bit of an anticlimax. When you start to hit the brakes, you actually hit them prior to going up the spike, so you don't really get any of the weightlessness you might expect from the element. It's kind of just like an inclined brake run rather than something good. If the spike had been taller and you could go up it at speed and then free fall back, I think that ending could have been great, but as it is, it just misses the mark. It may be that this is better in the front, but sadly I never got a front seat ride of this coaster, so I can't really say. It's a shame this ending doesn't really satisfy, as the rest of the ride is all really good. The ride's theming also needs to be discussed, as overall it's pretty impressive. It reuses the pre-show buildings of the park's former Shadow of the Bat motion simulator ride, or rather La Sombra del Murcielago as it was locally known. The ride has a brand new story however. Whilst on a charity tour of Wayne Manor, you become trapped inside by the Joker and exposed to his laughing gas toxin. Thankfully, Wayne Manor has a high-tech escape system for this sort of event, namely the Rollercoaster. It's a bit contrived, but it works and seems to be the only coaster in the park with any kind of grounding to explain its existence. The pre-show audio is in Spanish, understandably, however there are English subtitles throughout. There is a bit of a plot hole though, in that as soon as you leave the Wayne Manor library, you enter the Batcave, so I guess Bruce Wayne doesn't really care that much about concealing his secret identity anymore. After leaving the Batcave, you then enter the ride station, which is designed to look like a Gotham City underground station. The sets are all nicely detailed and really look the part. The visual aesthetic is a little mixed though, with some of the video elements looking like a better fit for the animated series, and the sections featuring the Joker looking like a Six Flags CGI presentation. It's a strange blend, but this at least is continued throughout other parts of the park, such as the wanted posters outside, which share the same art style. One thing I particularly like though is the ride trains, which look great and the lighting they have fits the Batman aesthetic perfectly. They seem to have a slightly different layout to the trains in other Intamin launch coasters, as the seats actually have a V-shaped pattern to them, so the front two seats are closer together than the rear ones in each car, so you get a better view when you're looking forward no matter where you're sitting. The trains also feature on-ride audio, but for me this didn't seem to work very well. It was barely noticeable on some rides and didn't really add that much to the experience other than some quiet beeping during the launches. I only noticed the audio tracks on a couple of rides, so it may be that this feature isn't working on all the trains, or maybe they just need to crank up the volume a bit. As a frequent attender around theme parks, one thing that surprised me was they actually have reused one of the animatronics found on the Six Flags Justice League Dark rides. If you're familiar with that ride, it's the one where the Joker is sat on some sort of quad bike with a gun that fires at you. In this instance, it's placed right above the first launch, and he fires at you just as the ride begins. Overall, I think the theming looks great, and it's almost as if the ride could be at a Universal park. There's always room for some improvements though, and a bit more shade in the outside part of the queue would be appreciated. Also, the overall colour of Wayne Manor just doesn't seem to be right to me, as it's all a bit too bright. It's not really fitting with the dark, brooding Batman visual style you're used to. It's quite possible that Spanish Batman prefers lighter colours though, particularly in the hot sun. The ride also has its own area soundtrack, which sounds suitably Batman-esque, and gives the ride its own audio signature, which is something I always appreciate and adds to the epicness of the ride. Unfortunately, reliability at the moment seems less than perfect. On my visit, the ride went down at least twice for an extended time, and when it reopened it was only running 2 trains, having ran 3 first thing in the morning. Each train only has a maximum of 12 passengers, so the capacity of this ride is significantly less than other modern launch coasters such as Pantheon or Tutatis, where each train holds 20. With these low capacity trains, it's a shame they didn't opt for a dual loading or at least separate unloading station like Maverick at Cedar Point has, as this could have significantly shortened wait times. There's also no single rider line, although the ride groupers did tend to pull single riders from the line to fill any empty seats that were available. It was also disappointing that there was no choice to wait longer for the front or back seats, as riders are automatically assigned a row by the grouper with no flexibility to change. The staff in general were plentiful though, and seemed to be working efficiently, although the trains did seem to stack quite a lot. I've also seen reports that on the 3rd day of operation, one of the trains stalled and got stuck at the top of the top part, which doesn't really seem very good at all. It's also further disappointing to me that filming on the ride wasn't allowed. This is of course at the park's discretion, and it's their rules, but I can't really fathom why the only POV of the ride they've released is a poor quality 1080p one at 24 frames a second. This just doesn't look good on modern screens, and this is a brand new ride. I don't understand why the park wouldn't want to show it off in all its glory at 4K 60. Take a look at the huge number of Tutatis high quality POVs flooding YouTube at the moment, and the free publicity that gets the ride. It just seems like madness to not either publish a decent POV, or allow riders to make their own using a secure mount. So I might have been a bit negative there, and Gotham City Escape could be better from an operations standpoint, but as an actual ride, I think Gotham City Escape is pretty great. Its pacing is top notch, there's a good variety of forces, and it's nicely themed to boot. So how does it compare to its rivals? I've seen this ride described by some as Europe's answer to Velocicoaster, and it's an apt comparison. Both Intamin coasters have multiple launches, a top hat, and inversions, and both are well themed. Gotham City Escape is impressive, but I don't think it can come close to what Velocicoaster is as an overall experience. The second launch on Velocicoaster is better than any of the ones on Gotham City Escape, and its level of theming is far beyond the Batman ride. I will say that Gotham City Escape has stronger airtime, but Velocicoaster is overall a more impressive ride. Similarly, I'd probably put Taron above Gotham City Escape too. Although the Spanish ride has more variety in its layout, Taron is just a bit more epic, with its amazing twistiness, immersive theming, and breathtaking launches. Tutatis and Pantheon also make good comparators, but again they just both seem on a slightly higher level than what Gotham City Escape is for me. The swing launches are more powerful, and I've added airtime, and you get the wonderful floater air as you go up each of the spikes. They both have some unique elements too that I've covered in previous videos. It might sound like I don't rate Gotham City Escape that highly, but I genuinely do think it's a fantastic ride. It's just that the coasters that are the best ones to compare it to are mostly ones in the very highest tier of coaster, so that's some really stiff competition to be up against. It's easily better than Operation Enterprise, Fury, Copperhead Strike and many others, but it's probably just at that lower end of the truly elite level of coasters. So there we have it. Gotham City Escape is a fantastic ride with a few slight issues at present that will hopefully be ironed out over time. It's well worth making the trip to the park, so go ride it if you get the chance. If you've enjoyed this video, then why not check out some of my other reviews, and consider subscribing if you like this sort of content. I've been Rollercoaster David, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video very soon.